More with Marty Jencius on podcasting. This is MacVoices. MacVoices is supported by Macstock Conference and Expo, coming to Crystal Lake, Illinois on July 11, 12, and 13. Get all the details and take advantage of the early bird registration through March 29th at MacstockConferenceandExpo.com. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. This is part 2 of a conversation with Marty Jencius that originally was only supposed to have one part, but we got so enthused and so in-depth that I decided to cut it into 2 pieces to make it a little easier for you to follow. Marty talks more about his enthusiasm for podcasting, some of the services he uses, and why you may want to try podcasting for yourself. Let's let Marty do the talking. There's so many questions I want to ask here, so let's just try to take them in order, in some logical order. I find it really interesting that you're basically editing 2 shows, if I'm understanding your workflow correctly. Yeah. You're editing the audio with some of the benefits of the services you're using. You're also editing the videos almost separately, because if you have something that is taking out ums and ahs, isn't it potentially changing the spacing? Does it just mute them, or does it take them out and therefore change the timing in relation to the video?
I'm really not doing that with the video. I'm just taking out like mistakes where we've stopped recording, right, where somebody's mic has gone dead and they're talking for a while and it's like, oh, wait a minute, mic's dead. And then I put a marker in and I just clip that out. So you get the full benefit of my stammering on the video, because I've looked at things. And I think Descript, and there are some other services that can edit video for that. And what happens is you get this jump movement in the video because you're taking these things out. So the video is much more of the raw feed. Occasionally I'll cut places where I see there might be dead audio in it. Extended periods of time where there's scenes, but I don't want to create too much of a visual jump in this with the problems. So I'm lucky if I can get through a show without having to press the marker, and if I do, it's going to be a good night. Generally, I have to press it once or twice, so the video not only gets clipped at the end, but it also gets clipped at portions in the middle. But you're saying I'm editing 2 different shows. Well, I've realized that while I'm sitting there for 30 minutes and the audio is being processed by Auphonic or being processed by Cleanvoice, I could be making banners on Canva to put into my video. So I'm doing both of them kind of simultaneously. Now I'm trying to economize my time. And at the same time, watching an old movie on my 3rd screen because editing is boring. But also trying to get to bed because I record most of the shows at 9 p.m. And after an hour, then I can generally get these things edited within 2 hours and up. So,
okay. Interesting approach, because just by contrast, I'm with you 100% on the jump cuts. Yeah, they drive me crazy. So I avoid them like the plague. Once in a while, they just become necessary. Sometimes you can't cross dissolve or sort of hide it. Sometimes it just is there. But the videos, you look at a 5-minute video, and you can tell that it was about 25 minutes, and they boiled it down to 5. Taking out all the junk with jump cuts and no even attempt at transition, and that just makes me crazy. But anyway, the next thing I wanted to know, your very last step, you uploaded to Spotify. So, is that the only thing you're doing, or are you publishing an RSS feed? Or is it just you distribute primarily through Spotify?
I used to use Libsyn for some of the early accounts and because I was involved. I worked with while doing the faculty meeting. My second entry into doing podcasts again, I tried to say, well, I need to take this to the next level. I need to get other people doing podcasts. So I got some faculty who were interested in doing podcasts and work with them to learn to produce podcasts. So there are some shows that are dead, like Positively Ethical, which was about counseling ethics. Grad School Deconstructed, still sort of limping along, needs some new hosts. Supervision Time, about supervision in counseling. Apply Topically, which were just current issues. And then Let's Get Uncomfortable, which is about sexual wellness, which is a great title for Let's Get Uncomfortable. And those I tried to put the burden of the editing on the faculty to do that. And some survived that and some didn't. But I was also uploading each of those shows to Libsyn, and each of those shows were a separate account, and each of those shows were a separate monthly charge. And I decided, and that was coming out of my pocket, and I decided enough of this, and eventually pulled some of those shows down and imported them into Spotify, and they're available historically on Spotify, but started to cut my budget by cutting the things I did with Libsyn. So most of my all of my shows now go through Spotify. It has, once you start a show in Spotify, it gives you a series of things that you can do to get linked to other shows. So you can get on iHeart, you can get on obviously Apple podcasts are the big, the big one you want to get on, Google. So it gives you ways of setting those links up. So every time you post a new show, the new RSS feed goes out to those different services or providers or major podcatchers, and it gets updated there. So when I'm announcing a show, I generally wait until I know it's shown up on Apple Podcasts if I've run it through Spotify.
Okay, that's interesting. So basically, you're using Spotify to deliver the podcast.
Yeah, and it's free.
And it's interesting because I use Libsyn. I have literally used Libsyn since day one, and so they own my entire life. But they have been great to work with. They have never let me down, and they are the professionals. They too distribute it, to Spotify, to Amazon, to everywhere you can think of. I mean, because they're professional podcast hosts, and that's one reason I decided I wanted to go there, because I wanted somebody that was able to focus on the things that I either really didn't know how to do or didn't have time to do if I was going to be a content creator. I'd rather spend my time content creating than trying to figure out all the back end stuff. Well,
back in 2006 with podcasts, you had to write your own RSS feed, or I found an app that would do it for me. Every time I created a new episode, it would create a new RSS feed for me, or update an RSS feed for me, and that was a godsend. But now all of these new services do it automatically. You don't have to think about it.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to make sure we touch on, because this is sort of the checklist I have. What do you do about web presences? Do you have dedicated websites for each one? Do you let the YouTube channel serve as your web presence? Or do you one way or another have a specific website for each show?
I used to have a specific website for each show, and I think some of them are still running. And occasionally I go back and find them and try to update the show list that's on there. But I've been able to, and one, that was a lot of cost. That was a lot of work for one person to do. And so I just put it under one network that I called thepodtalk.net. So I have a website, thepodtalk.net, and that has a list of shows. Some of them are there you go.
For you, Marty. There you go.
Little advertisement, yeah. There'll be some new forms of advertisement about the podtalk.net. But I'm finding it so much easier, and I'm posting on each show links that will take you to the Apple page that has the list of shows in it. You can find that on the web when you search for particular shows. So the podcasts are through there. I have a link. This is spring break and I've got some things to clean up on it, but essentially I also have a link, an announcement of when we're doing it on YouTube, and a link to the YouTube channel that has the show on it. So that when people say, where can I find your shows? I tell them to go to thepodtalk.net. There is another service that I use. I wish I had an administrative assistant because their task would be to, every time we have a new show, to use a service called CoScheduler. And CoScheduler allows you to link any of your social media in. So you put the links in for your social media. You get permissions from your social media for CoScheduler to post it for you. And then it basically gives you a calendar, and you can click on CoScheduler and come up with social media posts on the latest podcast. And it will also then automatically send them out to whatever social media services you have. But more importantly, you can schedule it. So, you can randomize it to the best times. And so it will hit the announcement of whatever show you've done on the social media at the best times that you want it. Or if you've got a show coming up, you just say, I want it to go out now, and join us on YouTube, this YouTube channel at this time. We're going to do a live stream. So if I had somebody that could do all that work for me, I'd be happy, but it's sometimes too much of an afterthought. But that's one way of doing the media piece for me. Because I can't go to I can, but I don't want to have to go to separate social media streams to get the word out, and then to remind people later to get. It's like Hootsuite, or what Hootsuite used to be, in terms of getting information out and scheduling information. But it's very cool. It's a very cool service.
Marty, but throughout this interview, you've mentioned a number of services you've used in the past, and a lot of them are current. There's so many different services out there that you can use that aren't necessarily specific to podcasting. But I've never heard of CoScheduler. Sorry, CoScheduler people. So I've got to go and check that one out myself. But yeah, there still hasn't come out with anybody as the perfect podcast solution. The trouble is that what's perfect for you might not be perfect for me, or might not be exactly the way I want to produce the show. You're producing yours one way, I'm producing mine another. Hey, first of all, they both work for us, and at the end of the day, it's kind of how you want to present yourself. There are shows out there that just, well, you can't, folks. You aren't going to. What you're seeing on the screen is not what Marty and I are seeing, and especially, but when we do MacVoices live and use on Zoom, and you see the group shot, a lot of folks will just take that group shot and post it as their podcast. Some will just take the individual speaker video and post that. I always hate that because, with no disrespect intended, but I hate it because as soon as somebody, if somebody cracks a joke and everybody laughs, then the camera's jumping all over the place, between five people, and you almost get dizzy until things settle back down a little bit. And so, that's it. There's nothing perfect, but I love this because there's so many different ways to go with it.
There's another thing that I do with promotion that is I leverage AI. So I take the transcription of the show, which it's automatically transcribed. I can grab it from Premiere if I want to, because Premiere's doing transcription now. I can put the audio into Script and get transcription. There's all sorts of ways and Apple will do a transcription once they post it. So I can grab the transcription, put it into ChatGPT, and say, I need 10 examples of social media posts based on what's being said in this show. And I don't have to, and it generates 10 of them, and I get to choose 2 or 3 of them and pop them into CoScheduler. I'll even put in the URL link for the show or the way people can get the episode and put that into ChatGPT, and it attaches to each one of those. And then I can go, one might be on this week's episode of Vision Profiles, they talk about the new beta release, which includes this, this, and this. So they're catchy ways of instead of me, we got a new episode out. It leveraging AI to be able to pull out things that are kind of catchy in pulling in listeners or people wanting to check it out because it's gotten the essence of what you want to capture in the show. It's been fun doing that too. So I don't even have to think about what the social media post is going to be. ChatGPT does it for me.
Marty, we're running long on time, and I know that you've got a show to record in a little while. But I want to make sure we go through the litany of all your shows, what they are and what they're about, because there are a lot of them.
Well, there are 4 of them now, maybe a 5th, depending on what happens with Tech Savvy Professor. So I'm doing Vision Profiles with Eric Bolden, who's also a part of MacVoices. And we met on MacVoices, actually. And then it was at that point I contacted him and said, are you interested in doing this? And he said, sure. And then I think the first time we physically met was last year at Macstock. But we've done 46 episodes weekly on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find us on YouTube. A Circular Firing Squad is the one that's still connected to academics because it covers academics and it covers counseling issues, which is the field that we're in. But probably every other question are just life questions, like which movie transformed your way of thinking. And it's the idea that you get as many people who show up. It's like a jazz band, and everybody gets to ask a question and everybody has to answer a question. We're into 86 episodes at this point. Every other Sunday night at 7:30 is when we record. And again, all of these are available through streaming on YouTube, so you can watch the craziness then. The Old Mac Gang is a group. Well, Chuck might remember this from the last Macstock. I was a little sarcastic with my Mac user group. I took a few jokes at their expense, or they took a few jokes not at my expense, but I guess at their expense. And I felt guilty. So I said, well, let's see what these guys have to say. And found a couple of people from Macstock who I knew and had presented at their mugs before. And also had a couple of people from my Mac user group join. And so everybody's over 65 years of age. Our oldest is 87, and he is coming to Macstock this year. So we'll have fun with that. And the Old Mac Gang is 18 episodes at this point. We record every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And I think tonight's topic is going to be on newsreaders and how do we use them in terms of our age group. And then a show that I didn't know I wanted to do until my son said I needed to do it. Gear Up and Go. We're 10 episodes into that. We record weekly at 12 noon on Sundays. That's been a challenge to find a time to do it, but we both agreed on that today. 12 noon on Sundays Eastern Time. And it's with my son because he said, you need to do this show. And I said, well, why don't we do it together? And if you've never done a podcast or something most people do things with their family, but if you've never done a podcast, he is a bigger ham than I am and entertaining and knowledgeable at it. And so it's fun. It's fun. And he keeps coming up with new ideas for the next episode. But it's basically tech gear that you would use when you travel. So Gear Up and Go. So those are the 4. And then, of course, I'm on MacVoices through the courtesy and kindness of Chuck on Tuesday nights and also on In Touch with iOS on Thursday nights with Dave Ginsburg. My wife wants to build me a soundproof studio because she says she never listens to the podcast because she hears half of them when I'm on them. So
I have to say it's an eclectic mix, but I think it's especially interesting that with the old Mac gang, you're going in one direction on the age groups, and with Gear Up and Go, you're going another direction, and with your son to boot. So yeah. I think it's a fantastic mix. It has to be very satisfying to cover that kind of range.
Yeah, and I think my son is just getting into the rhythm of podcasting. I mean, he's good, but he suggested we do the last show on what laptop do you need to travel, and it just turned out to be a great show in terms of his input and conversation, and we had fun with it. So, yeah, I'm enjoying them all, and this is the fun part of my life right now. I could be retired if I wanted to be, but this is where I'm getting a lot of my joy.
That's the best reason to be doing it. Above all else, that's the best one. If you're not having fun with this, because look, let's face it, if you weren't paying attention to anything Marty said, let's make it real clear. It is work. It is time consuming. And so you darn well better enjoy the editing, whether it's audio or video, and the researching of the services to hopefully make it a little bit better. And then just the discipline. That's the word I'm looking for. The discipline of recording. Because there's some statistics out there that most podcasts that start up don't go beyond, 3 episodes, 5 episodes, something like that. Because people think, oh, it's going to be nothing to it. I just sit down with a microphone and talk. And yeah, you can do that, but you're not going to last long doing it. So,
but even if I would say even if you want to do this, and I know you had Brian on for a show talking about his podcast and him starting it. He and I had conversation, or his website, excuse me, him starting. I've had conversations with Brian. I said, Brian, you need to do something. I mean, I try to encourage him in terms of that. And I'm saying that to people who are watching or listening to this. If you have an idea, even if it seems like a struggle, first, you'll get better at it. And 2, you'll wind up wanting to fix it in a way that it gets better and better. It's not that you'll just get better at doing it, but your product will become better the more you do it too. So I get asked about podcasts and how do you know when you should start it and what kind of criteria you should have in starting one. And so there's a whole process I use when I talk about it in terms of if you should think about it. And if you're thinking about it, these are the things you have to realize you're going to be involved in. So.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean you should be scared over it or just do it. I mean, I can't, first of all, Marty's a professional educator, so listen to him. And because I just endorse so much what he just said. You're never going to be happy with your first ones. If you go back and listen to, well, please don't, but they're online. But if you listen to my first podcast, oh my God. I mean, not only was the technology not there yet, but just, I didn't have that much experience, but you started and you do get better. And then there's this desire, as Marty said, to iterate and keep getting better production, unfortunately better equipment, which costs money.
Yeah.
But just to expand things, but most of all, just have some fun with it. That's the best part of it. Marty, the podtalk.net is where folks can go to connect to all of your shows. And so, folks, I would definitely encourage you to go and check out everything that sounded interesting to you, and maybe have a couple of the others that didn't, because they're all quality shows. Marty, how should folks connect with you if they want to? I mean, obviously they're going to listen to the shows, but social media, email, what's the best way to do it?
Social media, my last name, I always spell it out because it's sometimes confusing for folks. Gensius, it's Jencius at Blue Sky, or also at mastodon.social. So you can find me on both Blue Sky and Mastodon. Easiest way to connect with me there.
And I'm going to volunteer, Marty, and I'll volunteer myself too. If you have questions about podcasting, some of the things we talked about or services or whatever, please, find me on social media or Chuck at MacVoices.com. We'll answer the questions as best we can because, again, there are no right answers.
Yeah. And
Marty,
you'll get to discover your right answers for it, because as Chuck said, there are different ways of doing this, but there's no particular perfect way of doing this. We all have our own patterns. And when we start to create stuff, we stick with those patterns and they work for us and they get better. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's funny though, we're both doing the same thing. We're encouraging people to get started and try this, because I think we both, obviously you enjoy it, obviously I enjoy it, or we wouldn't have done it for as long or as extensively as we have. So it might not be your thing, folks, but if you think it is, give it a shot and see what happens. Marty, thanks so much. This has been a blast. I really appreciate the time, and we will see you next time on MacVoices Live.
Okay. Thanks for letting me talk about this. This is something I'm passionate about and love to have an opportunity that you've given me to talk about it. So thanks.
I have a funny feeling we'll be doing it again.
Good.
Yeah. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices, a podcast, obviously. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope it was educational and maybe motivated you a little bit. And if you didn't want to be motivated, then at least you got to peek behind the curtain and see just how the sausage is made. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.